I, I saw on your Instagram that you were playing at St. James Park. So you're a Newcastle fan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you like you're a proper Newcastle fan? Do you know Elliot Anderson?
Wow, that's a niche question.
It is. It's so niche.
Does this question determine whether I'm a proper fan or not?
It kind of does, but it's biased because basically Elliot Anderson is one of your players that was on loan to Bristol Rovers, the team I support.
Of course.
And we won
Of course.
7-0. Have you heard about the 7-0?
Yeah,
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 yeah.
that was incredible.
Um,
Yeah.
So that's like a nice loop. I really like that kind of
Yeah.
connection as well.
Well, Newcastle have been doing a lot of people favors lately, beating Arsenal, obviously, and
Yeah.
Tottenham.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of thanks from Tottenham fans and stuff. But yeah, I was a boyhood fan, in the 90s.
Shearer era.
Shearer era.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it still is Shearer era.
It's always Shearer era. That could be like your next album title, Shearer era.
It kind of has been for a while.
Yeah. So yeah, like getting on topic with music, I would really like to begin by exploring and keeping a focus on this kind of overlap of philosophy, divinity, and spirituality through the expression of music. And I'm aware that I'm kind of also, there's like a prism of my experience in how I've listened to your work and what it's meant to me. And I'm very much aware of that. So it's impossible for me to have this conversation in an unbiased way. I just want to put that out there to kind of begin with. But could you explain like the background of how you first got the inclination and you started to discover that for you, music was your form of expression?
Well, I went to piano lessons as a kid, as a kind of 5-year-old. My parents were quite determined that I would learn music because neither of them are musicians, and I think it haunted them. But I didn't particularly appreciate the discipline of it. It was grades, classical music, and I found pretty quickly that I just preferred making up little tunes of my own, and I kind of got hooked on these little things that I'd make up. But it was very playful. It was almost as a surprise to me that there's these little melodies hanging around. And then I probably stopped at the age of 10 or 11 when I started to have some agency as a person. I was like, I'm not going to go to this anymore. I don't like it. I never have liked it. And there was probably a 3-year gap there where there was no music in my life, really. And I got hooked on football. That was kind of my great awakening as a young person. Was, hey, if I'm quite good at kicking this ball, I can like make mates and I can be social. And also I think the physicality, the exertion of football was kind of appeased my metabolism. It calmed me and soothed me. And then I got a guitar as a 14-year-old, and football and music kind of meshed into one. I'm a kid of Britpop, and that whole cultural space was the same. Pop stars and footballers were vice versa. They could be alternated, So I was determined to be a footballer. At 14, I realized I wasn't going to make the grade. Early doors, I was like, I've seen some kids who have got it and I've not got this.
Yeah.
So to be honest, there was quite a rational decision then to defer to my second choice, which was music. And that to me was the easy thing. Now, always my thought was, you can always just do music. You can always just fall back on that because you've got these songs. And that was just a take for granted impulse. And from then on, from 14 onwards, I started to write songs systematically and seriously and with intention, making recordings, using my parents' mini disc player and these little mics, and kind of from that point onwards, making albums. Like I would make, say, an album every 3 months,
Yeah.
and I'd make a track listing and try and arrange the songs, and then I'd be so embarrassed by that I'd discard every single song I'd made and then write a whole new album. And this process went on. So by the time Wild Beast's first album came out, that must have been my 25th album.
Yeah. So you had that kind of trial period of, I guess, self-discovery as well through music.
Yeah. It was a trial period where I found songs to be incredibly important in the way I lived my life. I remember there was one significant episode when I was 16, when I was like my first love, and she was slightly older and had a proper job, and I was still in school doing my GCSEs, and I was kind of on top of the world. And then I couldn't quite handle it, and some self-sabotage mechanisms flared up for the first time, and it ended, and I was bereft, and my GCSEs were going on. And I remember thinking, these questions and this stuff that I am supposed to know is of no use to me at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And there's that point that I really thought, actually, songs are incredibly important tools in living.
Yeah, man, this is it's such a bridge, like I say, about like being kind of completely biased, because your music and like the music of Wild Beast has had such a profound impact on me through also a really dark period in my life. And I try and avoid getting too emotional in that respect, but it was really for me a space of solace. Like I find solace in that creation and the emotionality and the energy of what you'd created. And I find that music does offer that in comparison to maybe things that are more tangible or things that are a bit more rational. There's a kind of another dimension to music that has that essence of emotionality that can be really soothing. I really found that with your work as well.
I'm glad it found you. I'm glad it reached you at that time.
Yeah, it felt like that. I can't actually remember, because Smother was the first album that I listened to. And I think that was a spell where I was just always looking for new music, and must have just found it and then just really connected to it. But I'm going to put aside like that as much as I can to kind of, not get too caught up in that. Something that stood out when you were talking about the process of creating music was that you were surprised to kind of experience these melodies almost as if they were outside of you. Is that something that you've kind of consciously been aware of, almost like the music itself moves through you as part of that creation?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's something I think about a lot, because obviously when you tether yourself to the cultivation of songs or the finding of songs, you become very superstitious and quite odd. It's quite an odd way of living your life. And certainly your working process is incredibly odd, because it involves real tricks of the mind and tricks of the heart to really uncover the goods, as it were. It goes through phases, to be honest. There have been points where to self-summon, to find the words within and to find the songs within seemingly has been vital to kind of survival, to getting through this, to making form of this, really. I think that's the thing that people so desire in their life, is form from these emotions, from these invisible entities. And songs somehow stitch it all together. But lately I've gotten a bit more kind of open to the world, a bit less interested in myself, to be honest, and a bit more suspicious of the era of art that is so self-referential and so kind of determined to wave the flag of the self and identity and personality. I've become a little bit suspicious of what that means in a kind of material society, capitalist society. But you know, where songs come from and what music does, I've also been kind of really hooked on lately, and thinking about how, you know, you spoke about how the music Smother arrived for you when you needed it, and it was a place of solace for you.
Yeah.
But if you think about music, only humans have the capacity for music. Which tells you it's something to do with the upper echelons of our consciousness.
Yeah.
It's kind of something that happens when you break through the fourth wall,
Yes.
as it were.
Yeah.
And in that space, music is not, it's a physical product in that it's a vibrational thing that enters us through our sensory system, but it's really our brains that form it using the entire arsenal of brain capacity we have, you know. And that's why I think a song can stitch together memory with sensory information, with emotion, with physicality. And that's why I think why I said songs are such an incredible tool for living, because they perhaps are, in my opinion, it is the kind of master product of being human, as it were.
Wow. Yeah. Right. I've got a million questions. So I want to circle back, because there was something that you said, and it was a point of interest for me as well, around, like, for you, do you find that this music as a almost a necessity, like the need to express, to ease life, you know, to deal with life through processing and articulating the self? Do you feel that for you it was a case that you went on the kind of inner discovery came through the music, or that it was like a parallel experience? Or do you feel that in kind of dipping into that pool, into the kind of ethers, that you then also, you're bringing music from there, but you're also bringing parts of your, you know, your unconscious and the wider expression from that place?
I think it parallels an interesting word, because when you said that, I thought, I can't distinguish myself from songs. I no longer have the capacity to understand myself outside of making music, which can sometimes be quite hazardous, you know, because a bad day becomes a bad day. A bad day at the office becomes a bad day for you. But equally, you know, the highs are kind of full bodily highs, you know, the breakthroughs you make. But yeah, I do think songs do operate in the subconscious. And the more I've gone on, the more I've kind of dedicated myself to this craft, the more I've realized I have less control than I thought I did about what emerges and that actually there's a real gift to holding that space where the words can merge and form in your mouth. I mean, Moondust, the record I just made, was very much made from allowing the words to form over years, really, just singing the songs and not really having too much prior intention. You know, I guess we're all people who are predetermined to need intention, because intention is the way we become successful adults. and you know, we're in a time when so much is expected of us. I marvel every day at like what the normal person has to endure just to be accepted and just to operate within their society. And perhaps amongst all of that, the subconscious is probably suppressed, I'd say.
So I love the way that you articulate this stuff, which is, like, for me, part of the outreach, because I really like how I just sense you as someone who's very embodied, like you say, that kind of immersion in the music. I've reflected on this with my creative practice as well as a writer, and exploring like the land of ideas, you know, this kind of intangible but very real dimension, you know, and coming from also a lot of study around like Buddhism and the nature of the self, and like attachment to identity. I feel that state of flow in the creative process, there is a loss of the sense of self that is completely liberating and completely ecstatic at times. So it seems like that's part of your process as well, like following that. How, you know, if you have like, do you have a sense, like, because I sometimes, if I've got an idea, or like there's a story that I want to write, there's one at the moment that I've not put really much in terms of pen to paper, but I feel its presence, right? Like, it's like I feel the presence of this story, and it's almost like it's its own universe that I can access. And I know that when it's time to write, I'm just actually bringing that into using the tool of words, and like written form. Is that something you experience, like that kind of the periphery of your consciousness being like, there's something here, now I need to bring it in? And if that is the case, like how do you do that? Like, is there the structure that you add to that process in order to make it a tangible record or an idea?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. You know, you're constantly in the company of something, a person, or a form, a being that is other to you, that is doing something for you at that moment. And yeah, that I keep that company constantly, really, and the brief windows where there aren't thoughts and ideas, or I'm not in the company of a forming idea, it's pretty boring. It's disinteresting. You know, it's kind of a blank space.
Yeah.
So I don't, even if it, and this is the key thing, it's even the most stupid ideas can be so useful to you at that moment, you know, and it's important to honor those stupid ideas and not let the inner judge calculate the value of those ideas before they've really come to pass. But as for structure, I guess that is my structure, is to the constant upkeep of non-judgment.
Wow. Yeah.
And that's all I can offer. I wish there were better systems. I wish I had a more practical and economic way of doing this.
Yeah.
But there is something so dissatisfying about doing something the right way. You know, it's the bridging the gap. It's bridging the gap that you don't know how to cross. That is where all the invention comes from, where all the intuition comes from, and where all that kind of subordinate nous and ingenuity comes from. You know, we're not often challenged in our daily lives we don't often encounter these grand puzzles, you know. So the chase is tomorrow. The chase is the reason for tomorrow in a way. So I've learned to relish it, but it's also terrifying. I also am on a daily basis terrified by the prospect of that idea not coming to anything, or that idea being stupid in the end. And you know, again, the rational mind kicks in and says, well, that means you're in the right spot. You know, you're in the right place if you're encountering that nervousness.
So it's almost like a self-coaching mechanism where you're like, right, okay, I feel the fear, but there's a deeper trust that this fear is coming from the non-conformity almost.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like self-coaching when I say it from this point of view. When I'm in it, I'm just feeling it fully.
Yeah.
I'm a mess. Like it's not a good situation. And, you know, crisis of confidence, and then blind highs of confidence. You know, I would say I'm moving between 1 and 10 pretty
Right.
swiftly, and that becomes the norm. But I would say, you know, I feel it's a good way of being human. Like I don't resent those extremes,
Mm,
because I feel in their feeling is some that the feeling of them is valuable in some respects. That's what songs are. That's what they
mm.
do. They allow you to feel things fully.
Yeah, and I know when I reached out initially, I mentioned like the word ineffable because
Mm,
that was something I feel like your music for me, and I feel like, yeah, music's always a co-creation. There's some kind of like emergent quality of me as the listener, you know, and
mm,
how that's
mm,
influencing and reacting with my consciousness and my emotions. But it really felt like yeah, there was a touching upon this ineffable. And do you know, it was interesting because I was speaking to my mum and dad about having an interview with you and sharing stuff, and often like my family reflect things to me that I've forgotten. um my mum reminded me that listening to, like, when I first listened to Smother, I didn't really, that was before what I would comfortably define as a kind of spiritual awakening.
mm,
But the emotionality and the feeling that that album allowed me to experience within myself was like a prelude to moving closer to the ineffable, which I feel like spirituality is a lot. It's like moving towards the ineffable without getting too lost in trying to intellectualize it. Um, so yeah, that was like this like reaction and reactivity in like a form of consciousness with music is beautiful as
mm,
well.
mm.
Um,
And where did it lead you? What was the spiritual space after that?
oh, a long journey, a really long
Right.
journey. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, because for me it was a lot of really real struggles with my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I've had like depression, severe depression, anxiety, spell of psychosis,
Mm-hmm.
um, all also to this like 110 extreme as well. Like the anxiety's been a 10, the depression's been a 10, the psychosis was a 10 at one point as
Mm-hmm.
well. But through that came a discovery of almost like the because you talk about like the inner and outer in that relationship, a discovery that the framework for the outer world that we have isn't accurate, and that it actually causes
Mm-hmm.
that suppression, like touch upon
Mm-hmm.
daily life and how that suppresses certain instincts and intuitions.
Mm-hmm.
um, and there was just a real doorway for me in terms of self-discovery and kind of, well, if I'm not the anxiety, what am I? Getting into meditation, getting into different spiritual practices, but then almost discovering the building blocks to a new model of reality that gave me more permission to feel the fullness of myself.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Thanks for sharing that. That's amazing.
I appreciate you asking. Yeah, and really,
Mm.
like, I think, I mean, multiple times I've returned to Wild Beast, and
Mm.
um, something I don't want to just take up all the space talking through this interview, but you mentioned like the nature of time,
Mm.
and I feel like there is that quality of music, the interaction with the individual. The music itself is like is consistent. Like that album, it's the same. Like in terms of all the instrumentals, in terms of the lyrics, it's the same. But every time I listen to it, I'm like, oh, I've
Mm.
changed because it's the feeling's
Mm.
different, the
Mm.
experience is
Yeah.
different. So I'm wondering if for you, if there's like an awareness around whether like this feeling function, like if that happens first, like you feel something, and then there's music that can capture that, or whether it lands as like a particular melody, or whether it's a combination of lots of different things. Is there a way that you become aware of that kind of being that has this content that wants to move through you?
Um, I guess that's where melody comes in, and you are drawn back to this melody, which makes you feel a certain way. It becomes a gravity, and you know that kind of repetition, in a way, is a kind of technology for soothing.
Mm-hmm.
That that it becomes there's a permanence to that melody out of the kind of grand chaos that is the everyday of, you know, kind of what we experience, what we get through. That melody remains there, and it becomes a kind of vortex that you just surrender to and kind of fall into. And I think it's interesting how you said you were turning to the Wild Beast records and how you change around it, but it remains a permanent and pristine entity. You know, not many things don't degrade. You know, the natural processes of living mean everything degrades and changes and diminishes and regrows. And I think, you know, it's amazing how the modern era, say the Anthropocene, has been almost exactly accompanied by, for the first time ever, permanent products, as it were, permanent recordings, permanent photographs, permanent songs. And there is something about the Anthropocene and the way we operate now that assumes things around us to not degrade, to remain perpetually primed, as it were. And I think it's kind of one of the great tricks of capitalism and materialism is to keep people permanently primed. They're not kind of beholden to seasons or to night or day or to the changes in the body. We push against them, and there's this constant assumption that we need to return to a happy state. And really, it's just a grand, in my opinion, it's a grand narrative, as grand as any religious or spiritual practice, that is this cult of permanence. We act as if we're always going to be there. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's where a lot of anxiety and depression and psychosis even, I mean, it's not something I've experienced, I won't say those words lightly, psychosis, but if I dare say this, in some respects they're appropriate. You know, and and I've written songs about this, where what if my rational brain and my heart space are actually very much in line, and the sadness I feel in my heart is completely appropriate.
Yes.
And we have this othering now of sadness. It's seen as somehow unappropriate and unwanted, and it's such a great loss to us as people, to culture, to art, to other that space, you know, because it's a wonderfully rich and powerful space. And sadness is a very monochrome word, you know, for what really is a really quite vast spectrum of colors and feelings. And sadness to me is often absolutely delicious. Do you know, like it's a place where memory and emotion and humanity is really alive. You know, it's a way you can hold the world. And sadness is in many ways the result of being such high functioning beings, that we can have the empathy and the compassion to hold it. So yeah, I'm really quite disturbed when often in music, even in radio, and the music that rises like cream is often the kind of happy stuff.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, this oh man, there's so much to explore around that. I love what you say around this insight around like the way that technology in creating an illusion of permanence has created a form of suffering going against the nature of things. I've never thought of it like that, but you're right. Like it, you know, there's a difference between before being able to record music, like I'm sure that every live gig that you've done has felt different in its own way. And that's like a moment that has been there to be experienced and it's kind of gone. Whereas a recording and that permanence creates a different experience of that, that you could argue is unnatural, having that stable base. And it's the same as like you say, photographs, and how that creates a resistance to change. And again, this is also the Buddha. I'm not sure if you looked into Buddhism or how familiar you are, but this, like, the idea of impermanence being, you know, one of the greatest forms of acceptance. Accept that everything changes and your suffering is going to ease. And I feel that too in terms of that. That's the flip side to a lot of the stuff I've been through, has been realizing that our greatest potential lies in our ability to accept those parts of ourselves and the kind of messages of the heart, and finding coherence between heart, mind, soul, you know, fully embodying that. And that is actually, I think Jiddu Krishnamurti talks about, it's no sign of sanity to be adjusted to a sick world. You know, it's this like,
yeah,
that process.
Yeah. I agree with that. Excuse me. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I first thought, oh, what's this Facebook thing about? And I joined it. And then I immediately just severed it and burnt it in my mind, because it had categorized my memories in a way that I thought was so unhuman. To categorize memories in such a way, to me, was just bewildering. And I hate it when my phone pulls up this time last year, or I'm like, wow, like, why are we allowing ourselves to be so prone to these very abstract systems, like numbers and these value systems by which these metrics by which we judge everything are so abstract. It could so easily be something else. A number is a hieroglyph, you know, it's really of no use other than to signify what it does. And I think that's why songs, to me, I feel lucky to spend my days with songs, because they inhabit a different space in time. And interestingly, a song only works in the now, you know, in a very particular way. Because if you think about it, a melody only functions if you remember the past and anticipate the future simultaneously.
Yes, there's like a full loop.
Yeah. And without that, there is no melody. And you know, rhythm, a beat, only functions in the middle, in the now. And you know, the great crescendos and the great kind of movements of music work because you know they're coming. Even if you've not heard the music before, you know, you have a sense of it coming. And I don't know if you've ever read Oliver Sacks's Musicophilia.
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I've not read it.
Such a great book. Yeah, it's honestly, it's probably one of the best music books I've ever read, because it's not about music, it's about the brain. And then you understand that music is a physical function.
Do you believe that like the more I've delved into the nature of reality, sounds so indulgent, doesn't it? The more I've delved into the nature of reality, the more I've like explored, you know, the subjective experience and a kind of farther reaches of my own consciousness, and then the kind of how that links to then a wider understanding, universal consciousness, you know, this idea of the deepest self being interconnected with everything else. I feel that music, you know, if there is like an ether where it moves from, and the brain and the technology we have is a way of capturing that it is its own, like it's actually part of the universe. And I know I can't think of specific examples, but in like Hinduism they talk about this, like om is like the primordial sound, you know, of the universe, of primordial vibration. And I wonder if like the material, and we've evolved like the senses, that there is something like music is naturally divine, And I feel like music and the experience of beauty, they're two things that are real bridges to the spiritual, to call it the spiritual or like the divine. They feel like you're tapping into an energy that's also beyond the usual, beyond the day to day.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think it's because music is a function of our upper consciousness that it does keep the company of our belief systems and our spirituality, as it were, as beings, because it inhabits the same space. The two come hand in hand, and I often think about that piece, Allegri's Miserere, which is one of my favorite pieces of music. It was written in the 1600s. It was a property of the Vatican,
Oh,
and you
wow.
couldn't hear it outside the Vatican because it was too powerful. And that it was important to hold this sacred music within the
Yeah.
church, within the space of power. And excuse me. I'm really fascinated at the moment that a lot of the music we hear today is kind of gospel influenced music of, which was originally deep South, black music, and and that English language Christianity began with Henry VIII divorcing his then wife and dispelling Catholicism and Latin language. And Thomas Tallis, the great court composer of that era, had to completely disregard Latin in hymnal music, and all of a sudden just stick the English language in. And in a sense, that is the first time English as a language became a spiritual language. And
right, yeah.
And his Elizabeth, obviously Mary took over from Henry. So Mary took over from Henry, and then Elizabeth took over. And in that time, Tallis had to fall back on Catholicism and Latin through Mary, and then back into the Church of England with Elizabeth. And at all these moments, he was threatened with losing his head if he didn't do it right. He was going to be killed.
Yeah.
And to hold his place within the court. And I just find it fascinating that music, even if it's spiritual, even if it's, of the highest order, still needs to pay the bills.
Yeah, right.
And it's this constant interaction between the material world, the realities of living, and holding this other space, this, call it spiritual, call it other words, but I'm kind of drawn back to that a lot at the moment, because the value of music in that time was obviously high. If you had control of the music in the churches, you had control of many people's emotions, and if you plugged in their emotions to your power, then you're doing all right for yourself.
Yeah.
That was integral to the monarchy. And if you think what's integral to business now, it's to plug into our emotions, it's to tap into.
Yeah.
And I often think, what the music that we listen to now, this is where my suspicions come from. How much do they feed into our notion of being, obedient people? If you think about songs now, the love cheat and the quest of the grand love is the narrative. This is the main narrative of our songs. And the cheat is the devil, the villain, and love, this great epiphany in another is like another grand narrative. And I think, what is this serving? Because people are making good money from this.
Yeah.
Not many musicians are.
Yeah.
But
There are a few are making. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah.
I want to bring that back as well to like the process of, you mentioned non-judgment as being like really integral to kind of I use the word purity of like that original purity of the original idea. And then I've often thought that with ideas that I've had for or articles, or like how to articulate different experiences, there's can be this like fizzing enthusiasm when it lands in my consciousness. I'm like, whoa, that's incredible. And then when I do engage other part, like the rational mind, that is still like interwoven with a lot of societal expectations, it's almost like a success for me would be to get that original pure idea in its purest form created and made into form, as you say, but that there are so many like knocking points along the way that can just like, you know, take the edge off a little bit, alter the direction slightly. Like I might be thinking, I can't really say it that confidently. Like, what will people think of me if I write that? All of which are obviously linked in with the need for acceptance. How do you tether? Because I feel like as a musician, something that has always struck me, like it seems like you're able to really bring forth the unconventional style. Like you said, even when you were young, that was something that was really natural to you. And you go through these stages when you have crisis in confidence and that kind of thing. How do you move through? Like, how does that, like, as an experience, how do you experience that non-judgment when, you know, every step of the way, like, you know, take it from like the original idea to writing the lyrics, to putting the songs together, to creating an album, to perform it. Is it a constant battle, or is it something where you're just like, I've got so much belief that this has to move through me that I'm just going to get out of the way?
I mean, I do consciously try and care less what people think. It's a real battle, and I think there's such a it seems to me to be, I aspire to not care what people think. That to me, it might be untrue, but that seems to me to be the kind of the journey of the artist, is to end up in that space of creation where, you know, you're just free. But ultimately, if you're working with your humanity in your songs, then it has to survive in a space with other people. And that means considering what other people think, and being mortally wounded and surviving it. You know, I was looking through one of my old books recently, because I kind of keep these. I've always just kept these notebooks.
What is? I've got a very similar notebook. What brand do you use?
It switches, but this is a German brand.
No way. Is it the Leuchtturm?
It's the, yes, it is. Yeah.
Hayden, these are my favorite journals. I'm weird with
they're
journals.
good, aren't they?
Yeah, these, because they've got the page numbers in and everything. I can't believe we got the same journal. This is my mind, that ego.
Oh, lovely. I like that. Is that a label you put on yours?
Yeah, they come in the back. Have you looked in the? They've got like a folded compartment in the back.
This is the first time I ever had one of these. It's a good one.
They're so good. The quality of the paper as well.
Yeah, the paper quality is good.
Yeah, nice pastel shade on the cover.
It's satisfyingly Germanic,
right?
That's what makes it work.
Like engineered in just the right way. They've got also, if you're interested, they have they do their pens and stuff on their website. This is a really nice pen. Very good.
And is that supposed to fit in? Does it fit within the book?
No, you can actually buy separately a little hook. Who would have thought that this is where the conversation would go?
I'm definitely getting that.
No, I'll send you a link to their website.
Please do.
Yeah.
This is a Moleskine.
Oh, Moleskine, that's a good brand as well.
Yeah.
No lines?
Yeah, lines.
Oh, you've got lines. Oh, yeah, I use lines.
Yeah.
I'm a line user.
Anyway, I was going over, I was trying to find some lines that were a few years old, and I just came across this thing where I just scribbled down, it's like taking a teacup up a mountain. I think I was going through some struggle with trying to have a kind of breakthrough in the work, and I was really reminded of that sensation of, it feels like you start at the bottom of the mountain with a hot mug of tea, and you have to get to the top and still have some warm liquid in the bottom.
Yeah.
And that is what the work is. And
Yeah.
some spills out, you trip over, it goes cold.
Mm.
You know, you have to drink some on the way, but eventually, but you have to get to the top. And what remains is the work.
Yeah.
And it's a delicate process. It's that delicate of straddling logs and rocks whilst holding this precious substance aloft. And it does require a lot of belief, because there's no point in doing it unless you think you're going to have some when you get to the top.
Yeah. And that it's worth that you know, that kind of the essence of it is worth all the hardship as well.
Oh, it's so worth it.
Yeah.
It's so, I can confirm it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Like with, because that's one thing, right? Like carrying that tea up the mountain, but then this constant battle between like you mentioned, like the materialistic needs kind of seems intertwined with music. Like how do you, it kind of comes with the territory, right? Like those dangerous ideas, those ideas that you're like, can I really share that? They're the ones that, like, for me, I'm like, well, that's what, I'm not going to earn money from those ideas. Like people, that's not palatable enough. Like this story that I want to write, it's not going to have reach. Do you also have a process around that in terms of like a kind of fuck it moment where you're just like, I've just got to express this and see what happens, but then tethered with maybe like a more grounded approach as well? Not that saying fuck it, it's not grounded. I think there's a lot of value in that for sure, like as a creative.
I'm always amazed by the musicians who have some kind of plan for their songs, or have this kind of career plan, or have this tangible sense of knowing what they're doing. That is amazing to me. I've never ever operated like that.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's obvious to people, but but it's the danger is a huge part of it. It's the lure, and I do think it's in the blood and guts that you really capture people. You know, that's what art is for. It's to make you feel things, and often to make people feel things, you have to explore those unlikely avenues and say those improper things, unproper things. So I'd love to hear those, Ricky. If you have those stories that you don't think would be appropriate to tell, they need telling.
Yeah.
And they need telling in ways that are true to you, and that ways that reveal your dirty mind. You know.
Yeah.
That's you know, the dirty mind is a compelling thing.
Well, that'd be awesome. Yeah, if you're up for being my writing buddy, then I'll get a contract sent over at the end of the talk. You can sign it. Yeah, for me, so I've often I've been through a lot of processes around like fiction and non-fiction, and I've not delved so much into fiction, but there's recently been a kind of growing sense that a lot of the ideas I do want to capture suit fiction, because it's the same with music. Actually, I feel like there's you bypass the natural skepticism of people with fiction. You do it with music as well. With non-fiction, someone's always going to look at a book, look at the premise, and activate. And this is also depends on, this is kind of filtered from where I come from, which is being very atheistic and like scientifically minded, and then changing, you know, and growing through that. But non-fiction carries with it this kind of, this is true, and the value of the work is in your believability or acceptance that this is true or that it's valuable. And that's a really maybe simplified way of putting it, because I always try and write in like a creative or poetic way when I can, or be just completely practical or whatever. But there is that like you say, capturing those ideas, that kind of dirty mind, the crevices of mind where you feel, can I really express that? With non-fiction, I find they're the ideas. Like I've planned and not written a book on the pandemic and the depth psychology of the pandemic, and that terrifies me, because even the title of the book is kind of self-ostracizing in a way. You know, it's like I know that I'm gonna have a certain reaction. Whereas I think if I turn to satire, maybe that's more palatable for people, you know, than just like this is what I understand to be the depth psychology of everything going on. But yeah, that's a bit of a tangent. I really like this. Sorry, go on. Did you have?
I think, I mean, we're all we you know, a fundamental property of being a person is to be a fantasist. It's integral. Like, I'm going to go into town and I'm going to go to the bank this afternoon. That at this point is a fantasy.
Yeah.
It's complete fantasy.
Yeah.
Like, there is nothing that proves that I'm going to do that. But it's the same fantasy, which it's the fantasy of the next hour. It's the fantasy of this morning, and that we live so close to fantasy.
Yeah.
It's in our being that it's no wonder that to describe some of those fantasies is an essential thing to living, you know, and yeah. So, I mean, I yeah.
Are you familiar with like Jungian depth psychology?
Fairly,
Yeah.
not deeply.
Because are you familiar with the diamond?
No.
Okay, I've got an interview on this, and I can send you some info. So the diamond is in that kind of archetypal realm. It's basically the creative impulse. So it comes from the Greek terminology, but Jung also built upon it. And he expressed, like, for creative people, you have to create. You have a diamond that is with you. Like you mentioned this being. And that really is how Jung describes it as well. And it can be that enhanced experience of living and being all shades of the, you know, the experience as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'll send you, because it's really like, it's really powerful when you kind of, you see it through that lens.
Well, you know, I'm going to plug myself here, but you know, the cover of Moondust for My Diamond is a hair that was found on Freud's couch.
Really? No way.
Yeah. So my dear friend Dolly Chanarin, who's a wonderful artist, was commissioned by the Freud Museum to make a piece of artwork using Freud's office.
Yeah.
And he got a forensic team to analyze the couch, and from that couch they found a hair, and they created through the processes of microscopic photography, they have this blown up hair with all these beautiful spectrum of colors. And it's kind of amazing how the more we dig into fact, the more detail we go into the kind of mechanisms of existence in the universe, the more it just becomes a grand fantasy.
Yes.
You know, the more bewildering it becomes, the more that nothing is true. But you know, Ollie Chanarin to me is a great inspiration, and you know, he once told me something that I found so powerful as a friend and as an artist. He was making a book made of photographs of toothpicks and peanuts. It was just these little sculptures that he stuck of these little triangular, a bit similar to your tattoo that I've just.
Oh yeah, I can't see where I am on the screen, so because I want to look.
Kind of impossible objects.
Yeah, the Escher.
Yeah.
10 points. If you can you see this diagram?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what that's from? It's probably worth 100 points. It's a film. It's a movie.
No, I don't. No.
It's from Arrival. Have you seen Arrival?
Yeah, that's a beautiful film.
It's so good.
Yeah.
So it's
wonderful.
It's the metaphor, it's their language for time. So it's like this idea of like the infinite loop of time.
Yeah, yeah.
Which also sounds quite pretentious, but there you go.
I love tattoos. I don't have one myself, but I'm always impressed that those stories feel compelling enough to put on your body. It's amazing to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, he just said to me, look, I was like, Ollie, mate, like, I like this idea, but it's a book of peanuts and cocktail sticks. Like, I thought I was being a good friend. Like, he needs telling at this point. He needs someone to just step in and he was like, I feel compelled to make it, and I don't need any justification or license beyond that. And that to me was a singular truth.
Yeah.
I can't dispute that.
Yeah.
Go forth, you know.
Yeah.
And from that is kind of the ultimate key when you're making, is if you feel compelled to do so, then you need not justify it.
You know, there's a metaphor that comes back to, well, it's a memory actually that acts as a metaphor, which I think all memories do in some way. I feel like they're kind of metaphorical to different themes in our lives and that kind of thing. There's something that's come back to me when I've been, you know, toying with Mind That Ego in the process, was a memory from when I was at primary school. I'm probably like 8 or 9 years old. And we had a competition. It was an art competition, and I'm not gifted artistically, like with drawing and that kind of thing. And we had to, it was like a blank template of a house, and we had to create like our dream house with this challenge. And for whatever reason, probably subconscious advertising, I made like a Coca-Cola house, and like spent ages doing it, and like it had a slide where you go down with like cola and everything, and I just really got into it, right? And I looked at it, and I remember thinking, no, they're not going to like this. So I screwed it up, and I put it in the bin, and I started again. Wow. And I did a completely different design. What happened after that, the winners were being announced, and one of my teachers had taken out my initial design from the bin and awarded it as, I can't remember if it was the winner or like runner up. And I was like, that wasn't the one I was supposed to do. That was the one I threw away. And I feel like this, it returns to me metaphorically when I think there's almost like a very faint or subtle linear path of what I feel I should create and what I feel will lead to success. But that might, you know, all the ideas I throw away, they might be the Coca-Cola house in the bin. The ones that I go like, who wants to slide down a thing made of Coke? That's stupid. Coca-Cola. So I mean, different stories right there. But yeah, that just came to mind when you were saying that. Like, same with, you know, toothpicks and peanuts. Is this almost like there's an audacity to it, right? This, to honor that takes kind of audacity.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, to make work, to fulfill success, you know, it's not just, I don't know if it's possible. I personally don't find it possible. And I'm disinterested in those people who do. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, good on you. Like, you got the ball in the hoop. Like,
yeah. Now what?
Yeah.
How are we doing for time? Because there are a few questions.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah, we all good?
Yeah.
I'm interested in two things. I love Jungian psychology, right? And I sense that in you, you know, you're talking about the imaginal and the stuff with Freud and that kind of thing. And there were two questions that came to mind related to that. One was related to dreams. And I'm not asking you two questions at once, but I'll circle back. But one's related to dreams, and like if dreams influence your creative process. Because through that lens, it's almost like the veil of daily living is lifted, and sometimes really creative insights can surface free from that. And the other was whether you like consciously, because the tone of your music it varies a lot. And I guess that also comes from honoring, like you say, honoring the ideas that you have and not trying to shape them far away from their original form. Do you also find that through music you express certain archetypes or like parts of yourself, different strands, different chords that you can then embody for that moment? So there are two questions there. The dreams and the embodiment of archetypes, I guess they're kind of linked.
Yeah, they are. Well, I don't often dream. I really I sleep the sleep of the dead. When I'm down, I'm down. And it's kind of like a superpower for me that
Yeah.
under any circumstance, I will fully sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And at times of high stress or high creation, when I'm making records, my sleep will reduce to maybe 3 or 4 hours for months on end.
Wow.
And that's no problem either. But I don't
Mm.
really dream within that space.
Mm.
So I feel underqualified to really. I don't have that relationship to my own
Mm.
dream world.
Mm-hmm.
I can I remember a few dreams but I'm not sure how much they play into
Yeah.
the work I make. I do dream music now and again.
Oh,
That's
cool.
quite often. I do dream about being on stage with Wild Beasts quite a lot.
Yeah.
That's a recurring dream that, I've got the guitar in the wrong tuning or the curtain's about to come up.
Mm.
Because, I guess our time together is now exists in the dream world,
Mm.
you know. Um, and again, interestingly, although dreams are non-linear, music still exists in dream in a linear
Yeah.
way,
Yeah.
So there is something in that relationship for sure. Um, but in terms of the kind of scope and the spectrum of the music I make, yeah, in some ways I wish it was more succinct. I wish I had like Coke and Diet Coke
Yeah.
rather than the Sprites and the Fantas and the whole family.
Yeah.
Um, but it doesn't do what it wouldn't do what I need music to do for me if that was the case.
Mm.
And you know, I guess it's just an expression of being a multifaceted being as we all are, and going down alleys quite blindly.
Mm.
Again, following ideas fully, even if they come to nothing. I think is the hallmark of craft. You have
Yeah.
to fail, and I think, yeah. So it's a puzzle to me that actually, like, why the work is as diverse as it is.
Mm.
Um, other than you just allow the journey of the song to happen, that you really early on surrender yourself to whatever it becomes or what emerges. And like I say, I wish I were more on brand in some sense.
Mm.
But a lot of the artists that I love and the artists who I admire have, you know, very have multiple personalities often
Yeah.
within the same space.
Yeah.
It's and that I think is something that's quite yeah, fascinating.
I like this, this, you know, curiosity or the interest around the process and how it is for you from how many, actually, to be fair, I actually have, I was just thinking if I've got any assumptions around that and actually don't, so that's good. It shows that I'm being self-aware enough not to make assumptions around this. But really capturing that ineffable quality and how that is for you and like inwardly and how it is as an experience where when you kind of bring forth that stuff into the world in a way that someone like me can then listen to it. Do you say you don't dream so much? I'm trying to think if I've dreamed of music and I can't recollect that I have. Maybe once or twice. And I feel like if I had a dream, I have a lot of vivid dreams and they've really shaped a lot of like my life direction. And they're usually just really visual and really emotive. So it's usually a feeling in it that I'm like, whoa, I've not felt that feeling before. That's really strange. Or like a visual that feels more lucid than waking reality. So then I'm like, my mind didn't construct that. It's like it's come from somewhere else. And I think of when you were talking, I think of Palace, the song.
Yeah, yeah.
Because do you know like these like lucid dreamers, and also there's a memory technique where people visualize the palace. But did that influence it?
It might have done. That song is one that I definitely take with me. It's the only Wild Beast song I've ever played Beyond Wild Beasts.
Ah, cool.
It's the only song I play in my solo shows,
Yeah.
and it's just the one that has stuck around. So that song does have that kind of kind of elusive property. I'm still getting to know it as a song,
Yeah.
really.
I mean, like it intuitively, it's just in my mind now, and I think of it as almost like a imaginal metaphor, an imaginal place that you can go to in that creative process. Because you mentioned like fumbling around in the dark as well, as one of the lyrics, right? I think I wrote
Yeah,
it down. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Right.
It had a very. I was just living in a basement flat in Stoke Newington at the time,
Mm.
and kind of building worlds for myself. I was writing present tense, yeah, from a shitty basement flat, and um, and that it was more of it was a slightly tongue in cheek, but also kind of slightly warrior like statement of like I've got something that's
Mm.
more grandiose, and I've got a Taj Mahal
Yeah.
that you don't have. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite funny now looking back on it. You know, like having made Smother and that album going well and the whole thing going well, and yet living in London and living in a shitty basement flat with no light, and you have to question like, did I have to live like that?
Yeah.
But but it also humors me because there's no end to the humiliation of being a musician and living in London.
Yeah. Do you, when you're really immersed, like you mentioned being really in like the creative process when you kind of get less sleep and stuff like that. Do you, when you bring stuff together, do you have like a almost like a kaleidoscope of sometimes it's a melody, sometimes it's a visualization? Like, do you ever have like visualizations that you think, oh, that's part of the song?
I don't. I can't say I do actually. For me, it's a very practical act. It's a my working day is quite formulaic.
Mm.
I talk a lot about the chaos of not really having process, but one thing I do is I just get to the office first thing and start making, and I have no real time understanding of whether I'm making something worthy or not.
Mm.
Most of the time, I'd say I work with a suspicion as to what I'm making. Like, very rarely do I feel like, wow, I really came across something there.
Yeah.
And that sensation itself isn't trustworthy.
The
You
suspicion.
know, no, the
Or
sensation of breakthrough and coming to somewhere isn't trustworthy. You know, I
yeah.
listened back to some songs that I was determined were going to be on my last record, and I listened over them today, and I just thought, whoa, I was off the mark there.
Mm.
So it's kind of one of the agonies I find in of being an artist is never kind of, or not often, operating in a space of knowing.
Mm-hmm.
Not often does someone say, "Good job, you did well today."
Yeah.
That kind of affirmation of "Well done, you."
Yeah.
Um, you're doing all right, because
Yeah.
it's not. I'm not going to get a promotion by fulfilling certain quotas. Yeah. So again, I guess as time goes on, that agony becomes more normal.
Mm.
Whereas I think probably in my younger days, that weighed a bit more heavily.
Yeah. How do you and actually before I say that, I also hope that, in this discussion there's value in it for you in terms of also just being able to see the profound impact that it can have. Because really I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you now, like genuinely, it's really yeah, your music has, I would go as far to say within being reasonable that it probably saved me at different times, especially and come too soon. I've listened to that more than once when I've been at a really low point, and fuck that. Yeah, watching you play that at the Apollo as well. I was with my friend Duncan. I want to give my friend Duncan a shout out, because yeah, we're both big fans, and we were there together. Um, and it was for me a very spiritual experience, a very transcendent experience, but one of just pure emotionality. And like that song for me is, nothing's ever moved me in a way that song has. Like that is, I'm really grateful I get the opportunity to just say this to you now, because I feel like it's I wouldn't have imagined it. When I also think of how I was feeling at that time, like when I was listening to that music and couldn't see a future. So that I'm here now, like 10 years later, having this conversation is also a blessing. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Ricky. I mean, your words mean a lot. I really appreciate that.
No, really, like it's, I think, yeah, it's great for you to know that. And great for me to just have the absolute kind of blessing of being able to share that, you know.
Thank you. Truly.
Yeah, because you also mentioned crescendo, and the crescendo in that song were like, just fuck.
Yeah.
Man.
That was, yeah. I mean, that's the, you know, you sharing those words with me kind of is the teacup up the mountain. That's what it is, worth it.
Awesome.
You know, those yeah, you know, you occupy this space with people that is non-verbal, and it's very intimate space, you know, like, and your words will stay with me, and I feel them deeply. And at the same time, I know those words can never kind of quite quantify the sensation you're feeling, and equally, that I can't simultaneously convey my thanks. I can only, in words fully, I can only just kind of go forth with that, you know. And it's a special thing to have in your life, you know.
Yeah.
As an artist, that's a really special thing to have.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not the only one. I mean, I'm not not sure how much like people reach out, but my strong sense is that a lot of people, particularly, you know, would have found something, some understanding, or some I used the word solace earlier, like something from your music, you know, and what you've created with the band and your solo work as well, because it does have that quality, you know. And how do you put a price or a value on that? You're talking about music, you know, how this, yeah.
I mean, I remember making Smother, and it saved me, you know. So it was made for such a purpose.
Yeah, right.
That it was designed to do that.
Yeah.
And it was, honestly, recording Smother was top 1-2 happiest moments of my life. That 6-week spell of making it was like a personal revolution in making, because there was it, you know, the whole thing was written and recorded in 6 weeks.
Wow.
It was just such a kind of unrestricted outpouring. It was there was no reins on that. We just went at it with all the gutsiness that we had, and all the belief that we had, and all the brokenness that we had at the time. You know, it was, and I say we because it was very much a kind of collective. I'm here speaking about it, but you know, we were in that together, and it was made together. And I think we're all still really proud of that.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It is a phenomenal piece of work, you know, and well, if you call it work, but art form, whatever.
I call it work.
Call it work. Yeah, that makes sense.
I call it business.
Good business model you had there for those 6 weeks. But I find, I also really appreciate you sharing that and what it means to you, because I find that in the field that I'm in, and there's a lot I write around like self-development and spirituality and stuff that is, even Mind That Ego was started because I wanted to help other people. And then things sway you, and then, you know, you kind of start thinking, well, monetization and that kind of thing. But more than once, I've had to remind myself that the number one person I'm helping with it is me and like my past self. And that if I keep the focus on, like you say, you know, Smother kind of saved you as well. Like if you focus on that, it's almost like whatever is resonating with you at the time then resonates with the right people. And it did, and it absolutely, there was a lot of synchronicity. It did find me. You mentioned that earlier, that album found me at just the right time, you know.
It's funny how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah.
You find the work that you need.
Yeah.
You find the thing you need. I love that about, I mean, the one thing I will say is that songs often for me are a precursor of events. Sometimes I've written songs and they've told me something about my situation that was otherwise unseen to me, and it's changed things. You know, I've made decisions according to the arrival of a song.
Wow. Yeah.
And you know, change things up in a big way. You know, relationship wise, living wise, and because a song.
Yeah.
Often because a song couldn't be fully realized unless I became that person. It's a strange 1-2 step that goes on, like a strange dance where to surrender yourself to the song, you also surrender yourself to the message that's trying to get out.
Yeah.
And it's not always an easy one, but it's kind of a way of taking a pulse of yourself sometimes. And that's why, you know, it's interesting how you spoke about you weren't sure if the thing you wanted to write was the thing that people wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And I'm often thinking, oh man, like I don't want to disturb my family.
Yeah.
Or you know, my partner's going to be a bit inquisitive about that line.
Yeah.
But again, that's the danger space. That's the good stuff. And equally, I've heard songs, other people's songs that have changed my life. I've based decisions and whole years of my life have been based on the message that has come through a song. They are, as I called them, the master product. But I do think a song in its modern form, in a 4, 5, 6 long minute, I just think it's such an exquisite form.
Yeah.
You know, and as much as I do some writing on the side and I make work in other ways, and people often ask me, would you try this? Would you try that? I think, yeah, but if you can achieve that kind of beauty,
Yeah.
or feel that beauty within that form, then nothing really comes close to it. And it's quite something.
Yeah. How do you find like there's so many avenues that we'll get down with that, but I think for a musician and someone like who really explores these types of topics, how do you balance the introversion of those ideas and then bringing them forth with the very extroverted performance? Do you find that easy? Like I often struggle with that kind of balancing introversion and extroversion.
No, it's a challenge. Because it's work of great solitude that exists very publicly. And they're two very different worlds to inhabit, and I have to bring a lot of forgiveness for myself in both worlds. Like my inner self is often excruciated with my outer self, but you have to bring the work into reality. You have to stick up for it, stand up for it, fight for it, fucking fight for it. So the two are very interdependent, and I think a lot of artists I know and a lot of musicians I know are very strange people. but one thing we do often share is this capacity to be very porous and be very kind of fragile, but then at the sharp end of it be incredibly robust and hardy, because you have to be. And but there's something quite, that to me anyway, feels important about living like that and feeling those things. that there's something to me that feels worthy or meaningful, perhaps.
Yeah, the image that came to mind for me was like with music, you have that opportunity to have the inner experience and the joy and the flow that can come from that and the immersion in it. And then what I can imagine is a real, at times really anxiety inducing, but also really liberating and no doubt, transcendental experience of, I've now got this creation and I can share it with people, and I can, there's, I want to mention this because it's really cool, but the Heart Math Institute, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them. They're studying, basically they study a lot around the heart and coherence, heart related coherence, like electromagnetic fields and that kind of thing. And I've mentioned this a few times, I've written an article on this as well, but they've discovered that there's something called the Schumann resonance, right? Which is basically the Earth's heartbeat that pulses at a certain frequency. And when humans are at most at ease and most relaxed, our heart rate beats at the same frequency as that. And they've also done studies and they found that when, like, it happens a lot, like when there's group coherence, people's heart rate synchronizes, and it happens at a gig as well. The audience and the performer, they harmonize in their heart rates throughout the gig. It's like this collective, like, I imagine that's pretty incredible when you feel that. And like,
it's another realm, those stage spaces,
yeah,
being both on stage and off stage, I mean, I think singing together is something that people need the opportunity to do. Singing together is such a powerful thing. Singing itself, the effects on the sympathetic nervous system, when you sing, and the effects it has on, I mean, I never know if I'm saying this right. Is it the vagus nerve?
I think it's the vagus nerve, or vagus or vagus.
I went for vagus.
We'll sit with it.
And how that does mechanical things to your chemistry, your blood chemistry, and that to me is something I feel every day, and something I need, but something I'm also really fascinated by, and also how words elicit chemical responses. And that's that's kind of the beauty of music, and how this vibrational quality, this frequency can have actual chemical responses within your system. That's quite amazing.
Yeah. My partner Sanya does sound healing.
Yeah.
Have you ever tried it?
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's something I believe in.
Yeah. She's very instinctive with it, and will just play, and then through that experience of the box, she's got special crystal bowls. And like the effect that like you say it has on the vibration of sound on physiology, and it's quite incredible. And I think it's interesting. Like, you forget the physicality, you forget the material of music, and that it is a vibration. It is that it's not invisible truly in the way that other things that we've discussed are, like in the imaginal and other dimensions. It does have that component to it of physicality, and how that even listening to live music, and how that affects you on that level.
I did some experimental gigs for a while. I did it was kind of experimental. I was experimenting after Diviner, and in the writing of Moondust, I was artist in residence at a place called Lalo in London, which is run by friends of mine, and I did a session, an improvised session with a breath practitioner.
Cool.
people were lying down doing a kind of breath meditation, and I was doing improvised sound.
Right.
And I did the same thing in LA, actually, which, as you can imagine, was a entirely different experience. And I actually did a played along with a friend with a gong bath too. And those experimental shows actually had a really formative impact on the record I just made and my thought process at the time. For a start, because I was playing shows to people lying down.
Yeah.
And you have people at such a surrendered, vulnerable space that you already have them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you know, it takes you an hour to get people in a show to where they begin with them lying down.
It's already the physical act of like kind of surrender into the experience. And
yeah, exactly. And then add to it either breath technique or the frequency of the gong. And there were, and me improvising too. I mean, it was wild, like not going in with a plan and just singing and playing as the kind of moment happened was something I'll definitely take with me. And I think there's more to be had there. That was my feeling at the time.
I'll have to mention this to Sanya, because she does meditation and does a lot. She's like coaching and leads meditations, but she's doing a group at the moment she calls like Mystery Mondays. I love it because it's the ingenuity of it. Rather than just a meditation, you don't know what you're going to, what's going to come in the session, and it kind of keeps people in that playful mindset. And last week she did, it was like she'd play a song. She'd just say to people, just be with the song. And because she does music as well, and she's produced music, and she's very like talented in these different directions. She just said to people, tune in to whatever it evokes in you. Just be really aware of the emotion. And then she'd do a meditation between each song. But the thing is, she would really change the tone and the theme of the song each time. So it'd be really like calm. And then the next one might be like something completely different, like jazz or whatever. And she found in that, similar kind of realization around like the profound impact of that one song has taken someone there. And then 20 seconds later, there's another shift in their energetics and their physiology. It's had this like instant impact. So it sounds like that's something also for you, this journey in opportunity that you have when you perform. You can like go on that journey with the people that are there to engage with what you're creating.
It's I mean, I did a week-long tour 6 weeks ago, and I would say that I'm still in the space of processing it. And 2 months before it, I could feel my physiology changing, preparing myself for it. It really is an epoch in your being, in your physiology when you play for people. Especially when I personally, I'm not a natural performer. I'm a natural writer, and performance is a requirement of that being my life. But it's something I've grown to love. But it's something that that's that level of self-surrender is formidable.
Is that so, like, do you feel that you kind of need time to decompress after, like, from the kind of
I still haven't. I mean, I feel like I keep saying I'm not grounded yet. Like I've not plugged in to really let it out yet.
Do you think that's like the sensitivity to like the energy of the group situations that you're in, and like because it's so high energy, and like the focus, like I say that to someone, I'm really sensitive to like energy if I'm in around a lot of people and have to do a lot of work on that within myself also, just to kind of ground. I live practically in a forest now, which says a lot.
Amazing. I guess, I mean, the thing is about playing a show, is that you define the energy,
Mm.
and you have to be quite strict with that energy too. Like you have to command that energy and
Yeah.
pull people into your space. And you don't always have a cooperative room, even though everyone has chosen to be there.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a little bit of wrangling, and you
Mm.
always break through. And I think, if anything, one of the great things live performance has given me is just the belief that there's a point where the room will give, and that can be transposed to other forms in life, other
Yeah.
situations. But I do think you can, if you just hold at it, there'll be a point where it just happens, and it can happen after 10 minutes, or it can
Mm.
happen after an hour and a half, but it will happen if you just insist that it will.
That's cool. So you have like an awareness around the energy of the performance that you're putting on, and the need to, I think of the metaphor of like harmonizing, or if you play a certain key, other keys will vibrate,
Yeah.
like the strength and know this is the tone, and I
Oh,
will just keep
constantly.
playing and
Yeah.
people will harmonize with that as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
I wonder if that with the heart math stuff, if there is that going on, if there's an
Mm-hmm,
actual, like,
mm-hmm,
through the electromagnetic fields of the
mm-hmm,
performance, that you're
mm-hmm,
kind of setting that
mm-hmm,
frequency, and it
mm-hmm,
changes.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. Hayden, I'm conscious of the time. I want to just check there aren't any last little pointers that I think we've touched upon everything. Another thing I was going to say was, it was from Punk Drunk Trembling, and when I released my book, I was listening to that song, and the line "A miracle is about to happen" came on just as I published it. It's not happened yet. I'm still waiting for it, but I took that as a sign at the time. I was like, all right, okay, the miracle is about to happen. Maybe it's out in the ether somewhere. That it's resonating with people in a certain way. But it's really,
Of course.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and I appreciate that I've been able to keep my cool enough to have this conversation, and I've not fanboyed too much.
No, thank you, Ricky.
Yeah, I
It's
really
been
appreciate
such a
it.
pleasure. No, I really appreciate it. It's a brilliant way for me to start today. And thanks for your words, and thanks for your time and your thoughts too. Thanks for sharing yourself.
My pleasure. I'll send a contract to be my writing buddy. That'll be with you soon.
Yeah, let's burn together.
Yeah, let's do it. Sweet.
Thanks so much.